record, and we are on the clock. So share my screen with you. We're going to go back to Photoshop. All right, so this next project is a digital painting. Now, there's a lot of different ways that you can go about this. I'm going to start with one. I haven't scanned it in yet because I want to work on it this weekend, but I'll give you an idea of what's going on. This is a technique that I did for oh boy, it's not been sprayed. It's a little messy. This is a technique that I did for a tabletop game about zombies years and years ago, but the technique was pretty solid. I liked it a lot. The publisher, Arthur, or whatever you want to call them, they liked it too, and they always said, if we ever have another thing come up, we'll let you know. They never did, so I just kind of went nowhere. But I put them in my portfolio. I liked them a lot. I thought it was a cool technique. Basically, what it is, and I'll explain it when I scan this thing in and I get a little more cleaned up, is I just made a sketch of, in this case, I don't think you'll be able to see it. Actually, you might be able to see it. Yeah. All right. So here was the original sketch. This is for a short story that a friend of mine wrote. It's going to go into our comic book. Um, it's a little bit messy. It's hard to see, but that's going to kind of lean into the technique later on. But it's a person that's dying, looking up at a shaman, and then there's a couple people flanking the shaman on each side. And the shaman kind of wears this bird head mask type thing. So that was the idea. And so I liked it, but it got a little bit away from me. So I tried to clean it up digitally, but I realized that doing it digitally got away from the technique that I was going for. So what I did is instead I shot a photo reference, which I don't usually do, but to get the perspective a little bit better, I shot this reference, and I'll turn up the opacity some so you can kind of see what it looks like. So one thing that I was missing in the original drawing was the foreshortening of the person in the foreground. So now I got a lot more of the back musculature, and it looks like the character in the foreground is much closer to the camera, reaching away, and then the three characters are much further away. So this is a lot closer to the composition that I'm going for. So what I did is I printed this out on just cheap 8.5 by 11 paper at like a 20% opacity. Came out like this, but you probably can't even really see. So I printed two of these, and I took compressed charcoal to it, and now I've got something that looks like this. What I'm going to do this weekend is into this, I'm going to spray this with hairspray so it doesn't keep coming up. But it's basically a fixative. It's a cheap fixative. So just any type of Aquanet hairspray, use that stuff instead of fixative. It's way, way cheaper. But I'm going to spray that so I can start to use marker on this, paint and white out. I'm going to pop out all the white areas. I'm going to pull a little bit of detail with some markers and things like that. I'm going to scan it in, and then I'm going to do everything digitally. I'm going to paint on it digitally. So that's on deck for next week after we do the critique. Now, to this project. You're working with the same dimensions, 11 by 17. So let's go through it. We're going to go to New File. Make sure that you choose inches. Please, please, please. Nobody mess that up. Give yourself a big pat on the back. I got students today that messed it up in Canva. All right, now this is up to you. Is your composition wider or is it taller? This one's taller. Now it's not going to be 11 by 17, but for what we're doing, I'll go ahead and make it a width of 11, height of 17. And the big one here is that resolution. Make sure that you got 300 plugged in. Because again, ideally, we want a port piece. So let's try to see what we can do. I'm going to create. All right. I will do that on Tuesday, but now that I'm actually looking at it, it's been a long time since I've done a landscape. I'm going to do that. So I'm going to flip this thing around. I'm going to go to image rotation, and I'm going to flip it 90 degrees. All right. At this point, I would go ahead and save this to the cloud. Control Shift S. Save it. Like I said, I would save it on the cloud, but I'll just save it to the computer. Downloads, and we'll call this landscape. You'll call it your last name. All right. Let's talk a little bit about brushes. F5. Once you get your brush tool out, B for brushes, F5. Your brushes are going to look different than mine. I've got a bunch loaded in here. So let's just real quick, let's talk about some brush dynamics, and then we can kind of call it for the night. I'll go to brushes. I'm going to make sure I got my legacy brushes on. Got a lot to choose from here. I'm going to start with just some easy dynamics right off the bat. I'm going to go to hard round, go to my brush settings. Now, you could potentially do this entire thing on one layer. That's not totally uncommon. If you look at a lot of good concept artists, which that's really what they do, a lot of them do work on one layer. I think it's kind of it's gutsy. I don't have that type of confidence. So I will work on multiple layers, but let's go ahead and plug in one new layer here. For some reason, my layers are ghosted out. So what's going on here? Okay, that was weird. Create a new layer. I think maybe because it was locked, but that shouldn't matter. Anyways, I got a new layer. One thing I would recommend, if you've ever taken a painting class before, nobody ever paints on a white background. They don't do it. So think about what you're doing. I'm gonna do, I kind of like sci-fi. In fact, I like sci-fi. I'm gonna do a dystopian landscape. Okay, we've all seen something like that before. Is it nighttime? Is it daytime? Is it desert? Is it space? Is it underwater? Think about the environment. Close your eyes and think about it. What color predominantly is it? I'm going to do something in the desert. Mine's going to be a dystopian, steampunky desert landscape. Okay. So primarily the colors are going to be oranges, reds, and yellows. Start there. With your background, grab a color here. I clicked on the color picker. Find a color that you want. I'll go a little bit more in the orange family, maybe a little bit more desaturated. B for brush. And I'm just going to paint this whole thing out. Now I'm at a low opacity. That's what created that little rip right here. So I'm going to F5 again. I'm going to pull the hardness down. This is all I really want to discuss tonight, this little engine right here. We talked about hardness when it came to masking. I'm going to pull that hardness down. So I got a nice soft edge. I'm going to pull the spacing down. I'm going to change my color around a little bit. I'm going to add maybe a bit more red and a little bit more yellow. And this time I'll add a little bit more red and pull the opacity down to maybe 30%. Guys, I have no idea where this is going. I'm totally just winging it. Knowing that layer one, this is kind of like my background layer, I can change it at any time. I'm just setting the mood. I'm just setting the color palette. All right, maybe I'm fine right now. I'll probably keep working it, but this is my basis. Why did I do this? If you use a bleach white background, all of your colors are going to resonate more chromatic, meaning they're going to be more vibrant. It's going to appear that the colors have more color in them because everything shows up really bright against white. It's misleading. So give yourself a more neutral palette. Think about light source. Think about the color in the ambient light. This is going to give you a more true representation of whatever it is. Now, some of you might not do this. Some of you might choose this and just kind of paint right on top of it. You're not wrong. I wanted to share that with you. Okay, let's go back to my brush engine. What else do we got here? Hardness, that's how hard or soft the brush is. So now I'm going to pull up the hardness so it's completely soft. What if I want a series of dots, maybe like little blinking lights in the distance? Okay, I could, on a separate layer, grab maybe a yellow, bright yellow. Make my brush a little bit smaller, and then I could just pap, 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 Pat, this takes a while. You know, is there a faster way to do this instead of just kind of coming here and doing this? What I would recommend, F5 brings up your brushes. The next thing would be spacing down here. Just click, hold, and drag, move your spacing out. And now if I click, hold, and drag, I can really quickly create a series of little dots, lights, without having to worry about just clicking once, clicking once, clicking once. I'm just click, holding, and dragging. If I click, hold, and drag while I hold the shift key down, it will make them perfectly straight. So now that I'm looking at it, I kind of want my lights to be a little bit closer together. So I'll go back here. I'll decrease the spacing some. And I'll click, hold, and drag, holding down the shift key. Left bracket to make them smaller. Maybe the city's getting a little bit further away here. Maybe some go this way, some go this way. I'm just getting an idea of like framing in where this city would be. A lot of the stuff will get painted over or merged down, but this is just a little visual indicator of like what this thing is going to kind of look like. I'll F5 again. What else do we got in here? Flip X and flip Y. It's not going to matter because it's a circular brush. But if I had, say, this brush, which is one of my dry paint brushes, and I go to F5, if I flip X, now it's going the other way. And if I flip Y, it's going to flip this way. Now, I don't particularly want either one of those, but you know what? I'm just going to paint through it. I don't even care at this point. If I make a mistake, I'm going to paint over it eventually. So I'll keep those there. In fact, maybe I'll drop in a couple more. All right, so that's flipping. Size, I would use the bracket keys for that. Let's talk about these two functions and then I think we'll be done. This is a really powerful one. This is your angle. So I like this brush. I think it's cool, and it would be kind of cool to use it for buildings. You know, maybe I'll use this to just do real gestural strokes for the building, and I'm sure as heck going to use this when it comes to that Owlman composition. So underneath this, I'm going to make a new layer. I want my buildings to be dark, like a sludgy, dark green. But I don't want the strokes to be going that way. So what can I do? F5, this little rotation angle, I'm just going to take it and I'll pull it down to -90 degrees. Make the brush a little bit bigger, and this will be just a real quick, almost as if I had a palette, you know, with a big hunk of paint on it, and I just pull it down, a big dry paint stroke. So there's one building, there's a building. F5, I'll get another dried paint stroke brush. Like this one, I'll pull the angle of this down. Just kind of blocking in little areas. Say, all right, that should be a building. This should be a building, building. What if I don't want it perfectly up and down? Again, that's F5, and you can change it to whatever angle you want. Something else that's really cool. What if I want my buildings that go further back to be skinnier? Oh. Do that. These little widgets, not the arrow. The arrow is going to set the angles, but these little nodes on the sides of that bubble, you can pull those in and you can actually make your brush skinnier. So now I've got a little thin brush back here. Things like this are good for vegetation. I use them a lot for like weeds, because I know that Photoshop comes bundled with a grass brush. I implore you guys, don't use that thing. Nothing reeks of a junior illustrator more than using that grass brush. Like everybody that's anybody has used it for grass. I mean, why? Because it looks like grass, but you can spot that stuff a mile away. Nothing says, oh God, they did that in Photoshop more than that grass brush. So try to avoid it. Try to come up with a different angle for it. So these settings right here, the size, the roundness, you know, making something thick or thin, the angle, the spacing, and the hardness. These 5 criteria right here, along with just your default brushes, you can almost make any brush that you would ever need. So play around with those over the weekend, get your comp started. Here's what I would like to have ready by Tuesday. And I don't think we'll get a chance to look at anybody's, but maybe, I don't know. Build your composition 11 by 17. Think about portrait or landscape. Get some ideas in mind. Is it going to be a portrait? Is it going to be a landscape? Something different? Let me know. In order to qualify as a digital painting, there needs to be some element of representation. What I don't want to see is an abstract expressionism. Those are cool. Don't get me wrong. I think they're very, very cool, but that's not what we're looking for. We need to be able to look at your final product and say, oh, that's a cat, or that's a dystopian landscape, or that's a gorilla on a ledge of a mountain. So we need to be able to look at it and kind of tell what it is. Now, beyond that, can it be abstracted? Awesome. That'd be great. I don't want them to look photorealistic, honestly. Because if it looked photorealistic, I would hire a photographer. I want the painterly mark in there. Everyone clear on that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So on Tuesday, and I'll say this and I'll stop recording. On Tuesday, we're going to start with the critique. We got 3 students. We're going to get that done. That should probably take us to about 7 o'clock. Then we're going to continue with a painting demo. We're going to talk about brushes in depth. We just scratched the surface as far as how to manipulate brushes. Now I want to talk about how to find brushes from the web, download them, get them into Photoshop. We can talk about how to make brushes probably on Thursday. And I'll talk about how to save brushes. But these 3 weeks, it's going to be brush, brush, brush. So hopefully by the end of this, we know this tool inside and out. Talk about the pencil tool. These other 2 tools, not so much. They don't come up that often. If you want to know that, stick around at the end of the chat. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about the eraser tool a little bit, even though this is kind of defunct now that we know how to mask, but it is there. I think I'll probably end with a history brush demo. I don't think anybody uses it anymore. I really don't, but there is a kind of a cool technique underneath this with the art history brush. Listen, if you absolutely stink at digital painting and you're just like, I've got this image, I need to make it look painterly, but I'm no good at it. This isn't out. This is an option, but it's kind of a hokey cheat. But I'll show it to you. I've used it before, to be honest. So that's there. All right. I'm going to stop the record.